Saida. I'm originally from Belarus, and I am the founder and the president of Youth to Youth Initiative, which is the youth-led NGO based in Lithuania, but acquired an international status and basically works with young communities and youth all around the world. And the basic idea is to provide a holistic and accessible training and vocational, educational, networking opportunities for young people throughout the world. So basically, I've started this initiative, or co-founded it, back in 2014. But at that time, I just give you a little bit of background story how I came up with this, because I was a part of the youth community who was searching for the empowerment once. From 2010 to 2014, I attended lots of events and programs that were supposed to empower young people, and I was looking for that kind of, key to the empowerment. But I came. By the end of 2014, I realized that I was just full of frustration. Basically, every program I attended the agenda was pulled by some kind of institution that had nothing to do with young people. They didn't know where we're coming from, what we need to receive. So it was just a series of meaningless engagement, and the results were basically zero. I got connected to some of the peers, which was a beautiful thing, but at the end of the day, nothing changed in my life, and I was not equipped with the tools or methods or some interesting, things that I could have learned, I could have applied in my own environment. So this frustration led to me that I found myself at the end of 2014 with two other fellows who had similar feeling, shared the same feeling, and we decided that we're going to do something about it. So why don't we just start an event which would be done by young people for young people. So we started to research our community and all that network that we acquired by this time, and see what are the questions, what are the needs from young people that they really, really want to discuss. Because the first event that we were thinking about was more about networking and bringing young people together to discuss some of the issues that we thought very important, and those are the challenges that we wanted to find the solutions for. And 4 months after, we brought this big event in Lithuania, in its capital, Vilnius, that called the first Youth to Youth Summit. Actually, it was just the Youth to Youth Summit, because we didn't know it's going to be any kind of a follow-up of that. And that event brought together around 120 people from 90 nationalities. We received 2,000 applications from all around the world. That was like an incredible result that we never expected. And the event was very successful. All the panelists were young people. There were no, like the organizers were young, the panelists were young, the audience were young. And we speak common language. There was no gap between us. And the event was so successful, so at the end of this 4 days event, the audience started to approach us and ask, so where is the next event? And we didn't have the answer, because by this time we were just a group of informal group of people, were just free girls, who just decided to make some kind of a different event and bring it to the stage. And we realized that there is a certain need from this community, and we need to do something. So after 2 months after the event was over, we registered their organization. That's how the Youth to Youth Initiative was brought to life, and the principle of youth for youth was the major principle of this organization that we still use and we still believe in, and that's how we design all of our programs, because right now it's the international community that does not only international summits, but brings the programs on CV, PV, training for trainers, the social entrepreneurial school for early entrepreneurs, and we bring it to different communities all around the world.
Thank you. And I'll just acknowledge quickly, we have 2 speakers online, so they will also introduce themselves. Go ahead, Cristina.
So I'll just use a timer. I try to make sure to stick to the timing to make it easier on Rachel, our great moderator. And thanks to Rachel for agreeing to moderate. We've planned all this across country, so I just met her in person like 2 minutes ago. Hi, I'm Cristina Scabbia. I live in Seattle, Washington, the other Washington as we joke. And the words that I want to give you are inclusion versus exclusion. So if you are a youth, you have probably encountered many times wanting to participate in something and being told that there's a long application process and only 3 people can get chosen. Or maybe when you have more experience, then you can join us. The reason I want to bring this up is because I met Saida when we were doing a UN fellowship that we were both fortunately selected for. And she was telling me about this idea and the summit. And I was like, oh, hey, can I come? And she's like, yeah, come join us. That's the message I think I want to just really put across today, because it's about saying to people, join us, be part of our group. You're welcome. We want you to be part of it. We value what you bring, because that's really what's lacking in how we address youth. So it's been 5 years. I've come to almost all of the summits. We've done the summer school together. We've got a lot of stuff going on. But the other thing I'll just tell you about myself is that I'm here, and I wanted to do this panel because I just believe wholeheartedly in youth empowerment. I teach at a community college in Seattle, and I left a different position that paid more and was more stable so that I could focus on, I teach political science, empowering youth and teaching them how to access the political system. And I want that to be really well known, that that's sort of what we're getting at here, is that as I'm getting older, I'm moving out of the youth category here in a few years, it's about opening up the space for other people. It's about taking what I have access to and now sharing that with others and elevating the voices of others. And so probably some of the other stuff I do will come up, but I just wanted to tell you that that's sort of why I'm here. That's what I'm really thinking about. And again, the most important thing we can just take away from my perspective is that inclusion piece. Join us. You're welcome. We value you.
Okay, we're having some slight technical difficulties. We're going to turn it over to Sata, if we can get her on screen. She is joining us. Is she, can you put her on screen? Okay. Yes. Yeah,
Hi.
while we're waiting, I have a few questions to ask you, the audience, because we don't want this to be the typical panel where we just sit here and talk to you. We'd love to hear your opinions. And so it's really helpful if we know who you are in the room. So I'm going to ask 2 questions now. One is which sector you're representing. I know that this conference brings not just peace builders and NGOs, but also academia and government representatives sometimes. So, okay, first question, which sector do you represent? NGO, raise your hand. Okay. Government? Private sector? Okay. Multilateral? Okay. Academia? All right, a few people wearing multiple hats. And what is your primary role? Practitioner or programming? Okay. Accountability learning? Fundraising, business development? Everyone, always. Advocacy, policy? Okay. Funding, grant making? Wow, the man with many hats and the money. Executive management? Okay, interesting. So about 50% of you are NGO, and then we've got a smattering of other sectors and a lot of different roles in the room. Sata, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Is it okay now? Because
Yep,
I can.
we hear you clearly.
Okay. So my name is Sata F Sharif, and I'm an advocate from Liberia, and basically advocate for the rights of children and girls in Liberia. And I'm the founder and executive director for Action for Justice and Human Rights. It's a non-governmental organization in Liberia that advocates for the rights of children, girls, and every human. Currently, we run a program called We Say Change, which is both an online safe space and an offline safe space where we provide psychosocial counseling for SGBV survivors. We also create awareness on social gender-based violence issues. And so most of our work currently is based on working with girls in hard to reach communities, girls that are affected by sexual violence, and including children who come in conflict and contact with the law. My experience is basically as I grew up in Liberia, and as a child, I had the opportunity to become a member of an institution called Daughters of the Kings. Later on, I became a child broadcaster. I was elected as the first female speaker of the Liberian Children's Parliament, which is like the biggest institution by children and for children, and is being facilitated by the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection in Liberia. And since then, my journey as an advocate has expanded from just being a local advocate in Liberia to being an international child rights advocate, to becoming a peace ambassador for One Young War. I had like the opportunity again to address almost 2,000 persons last year in The Hague, and I've traveled to the UN, the AU to advocate for children's rights, especially the Liberian children, in my capacity as speaker or as a young person and advocate and peace ambassador for One Young War. So this is just like a short bio about me, but currently I'm in the US. I'm a student of Wittenberg University. I'm double majoring in economics and sociology with concentration in criminology. And I'm so excited to be on this call because it's important that we have this conversation, and it's important that we as young people, and especially me as a very young person, to have my views, said on issues when it comes to youth empowerment and all that, especially from the human rights perspective.
So much, Sata. And I might mention to everyone that she had to get special permission from her professor to miss class in order to participate today. Yes, so thank you.
So class is for right now.
Sean, are you able to turn on your video and introduce yourself?
I can try. Unfortunately, every time I do, the connection gets really poor, so I don't want to risk it unless I can say hi and then go back to audio, because it's that might be our best option.
That sounds good.
Hello,
All
everyone.
right. Hello. We see you.
Okay, so just let me know if you can't hear me or if I'm cutting out. Like Cristina and Saida, I've been a part of the Youth Initiative since 2015. I was a participant in the first conference in Lithuania, and then worked as a staff member for 2 conferences, one in Dubai and the other in Malmo, Sweden. And what brought me to the Youth to Youth Initiative was the Olive Tree Initiative, which is what I'm currently working for now as an executive administrator. I work primarily on the finance and programming side. However, I wear many hats and do a lot of fundraising, work with college students. And what the Olive Tree Initiative is a conflict analysis and resolution group based at the University of California, Irvine. However, we have multiple chapters across the country, and even going internationally, we have a chapter in Glasgow, Scotland. And what we do is leadership development, conflict analysis, resolution, with a big emphasis on experiential learning. And what we do is Every summer for 6 weeks, we take students to the Middle East. They are 2-3 week programs. And what the Middle East consists of, we take students to Washington, D.C., New York City, and then we fly into Jordan into Israel, and then into the West Bank. And the idea is to understand conflict analysis and narratives through multiple narratives, and understanding that there are not just one and two sides, but multiple sides of a conflict. We also focus primarily in the South Caucasus region as well, between the countries of Turkey and Armenia, about the historical conflicts, about genocide recognition of the country of Armenia and the diaspora at large. And what we do is also throughout the year have many programming initiatives, such as learning about unconscious biases, learning about we bring people from the region to the university and have them speak on behalf of their experiences. And the idea is to have students act as student diplomats. So for them, it's not an advocacy group. What we like to advocate for is for students to learn. And what we do is we teach students how to ask various questions and use conflict resolution skills, such as specific languages that we like to emphasize on. And that's what I've been doing for the past year, but I've been involved with the Olive Tree Initiative for about 8 years now, and got involved through the alumni network of a student who told me about a website called Opportunity Desk, and went on, and then that's how I found Youth to Youth Initiative, which I find to be, again, a very helpful program for youth led by youth. And I just want to mention one last thing about the Youth to Youth Initiative, is that I feel that today there are no more gatekeepers with regards to whatever pursuit young people are trying to do. However, we're kind of at a crossroads here where we don't know what's going on. And I feel that Youth to Youth Initiative is a great opportunity for young people to meet and find opportunities to explore new projects and careers.
So I think we've heard from a few of the different panelists already some hints of what we really mean by youth empowerment. We heard that it involves youth actually deciding what they're talking about and what their programs will look like. It involves recognizing young people's expertise. We know young people around the world are leading initiatives that are actually creating really important change. And then also we've had some other hints of the wider system around. I had a really great conversation once where I was talking to a colleague in Lebanon, and she was saying, yeah, we keep doing these capacity building programs. And I finally turned to the other program manager and I was like, how many times can we build the capacity of the same youth over and over and over again? To what end are we doing this? How do we shift the system? Because they're having their capacity built, and then what happens after that? And one of the things that also came out of this Missing Piece report was what happens in a lot of these programs is young people's capacities and expectations are elevated. They finish the program 12 months or 18 months later, and the system that they're living in, the realities that they're up against are just the same. They're still not able to get even interviewed for whatever job they really want, or they're just not able to access the education that they want, or whatever it is. Their opinion is not taken seriously on issues that really affect their day-to-day. So let's hear a little bit more from the panelists, specifically about what youth empowerment means. And I will turn maybe to Sata first this time. Sata, can you share what youth empowerment means to you?
I think youth empowerment is more of a process. It's about the inclusion of young people and children in decision-making processes, be it at the national or international level. It's about making donor funding accessible to young people in youth-led institutions, and ensuring that criteria that are set up by donor fundings, localized and integrated in a way that it is youth-friendly. And then that, far too often we have some of these fundings that go out for like legal institutions. There are many youth institutions that are not registered or so, either because of the work they do locally in the Pacific countries, like institutions that advocate for the rights of people, and because they tend to go against government rules, and sometimes when with our human rights violations, because young people go against these things, so it's kind of hard. And youth empowerment is also about providing training skills for young people to take on take on charge to change their lives and to influence decisions and the space around them. It's more than just involving young people in organizational programming like celebrating Youth Day or Children's Day, or an institution organizing a workshop or for young people and children. Youth empowerment goes beyond that. It's about engaging young people from the planning stage to organizing to implementing organizational strategies and programs. So it's about engaging and placing young people at the front line of national decision-making processes. Youth empowerment for me is more complicated than it seems as a young person who has been, involved from my childhood. But we can better practice it by always engaging, involving, asking, and allowing young people to grow and feel comfortable in raising their voice. When a young person, starts a movement or an organization, I think it's important that we support them, encourage them. I vividly remember when I participated in Daughters of the Kings in Liberia. I was trained with life skills. I was allowed to find my voice and passion as a child. And as a child broadcaster in my country, when I got nominated to run for the Liberian Children's Parliament elections, and guess what? Because I was allowed and trained and I got involved, I got elected as Speaker of the Liberian Children's Parliament. No one saw it coming, but because a bunch of people in Liberia by then believed in me, they supported me and helped to empower me with both the knowledge and skills that I needed as a leader, and to learn to strive and reach my full potential. So it was very important. And through the Children's Parliament, we were able to pass the Liberia. We advocated from making the children's law a national conversation. The Children's Act was drafted. We went to the House of Legislature. By then I was a child, and there were parliamentarians like Abraham Keita, like Emmanuel Bobla, and the rest of the other children who were just children, but because they were empowered, we went from one office to another to lawmakers. We advocated. And in 2011, the Liberian Children's Law was signed into law. Today, Liberia is one of the few countries in West Africa that have domesticated the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child through the Liberian Children's Law. It all happened because children were being empowered. We were developed to participate in national decision-making processes and all of those things. So for me, it's more than
really
just building the capacity of young people. It's about involving, engaging, and asking them to, take charge of their lives.
Thanks, Sata. And what I heard is it's a combination of the skills and capacity building plus having young people's voices heard and actually being involved in processes that affect policies and decisions that affect their everyday lives. Who wants to go next?
Pretty quick, and it's, you summarized that really well. What I wanted to say is that empowerment is finding and using your voice, and that can mean different things for different people. But the second half of that, which is what Sata just said, is using that voice to change institutions. Institutions today like to throw what I call treats at the youth. Here's this workshop, here's this fellowship, here's this fun event to go to. Go tell us your ideas. Is anyone from the government in this room right now? No, right? Because that's not where they plan to be. So the point is that a lot of times engaging with youth is about seeming like you're interested or seeming like you are invested when you are not, because real investment means you're not just going to listen, you're going to take action. And so for me, youth empowerment is about the individual finding and using their voice, but ultimately then taking that forward to change the institutions. And again, I'm using the government as an example, as a kind of abstract concept of this governance thing, but it could be anything. It could be access to things you need in your school, in your community, even relationships that you might have. And so I think that it's that follow through that you were both mentioning, that it's what's your path, but using it and really using it to get institutions to actually listen and engage with youth and not just say, oh, we totally care about youth. Like, as long as you're not asking us to give up any power, yeah, we care about youth. Okay. Saida, you want to jump in?
Well, I'm very solution-oriented person, and I don't have probably a lot of to say about the theory of this of the empowerment. But what I can say that worked for Y2Y and something that we adopted along the last 5 years is the two key elements that I believe works the best right now for the empowerment is the peer-to-peer empowerment and peer-to-peer learning that I think is the key to empower young people, because the programs that we design together with young people, we also implement and input the case study, the real success stories and failure stories from other young people. So the people who comes to learn, young youth who comes to learn and participate in the program, they don't feel like we throw at them some solutions from that been adopted years ago. We just share with them the knowledge that we acquired from their peers, basically. And another element that I feel is super empowering is the action-oriented approach. So what we discovered for the first 2 years of working at Y2Y is that we implement the social entrepreneurial approach, or approach that based on developing initiatives, whether we're talking about PV, CV trainings, or we talk about the School for Early Social Entrepreneurs, we make the possibility and a safe space for young people to design the ideas from the scratch. And most importantly, these young people feel that they are a part right now of the community of like-minded people, and they can find the team members for implementing those ideas and projects after the actual program is over. And so this follow-up, the focus on activities and the actions, and the follow-up programs that we usually provide for the participants, we usually give a 1-year incubating space for young people, which is online, so they can access it from any part of the world, to design and to test all of their findings and ideas and whatever they think would work the best in their own communities, because we don't know. We can only provide the tools, we can support, we can connect with others who tested something like this, and that proved to be working. And this is something that we keep on implementing and keep on co-designing with them.
That's really interesting. The peer sharing and connections are, and I think also social belonging, maybe that sense of social belonging that they give to one another, is I think another really important part of youth empowerment. Sean, did you want to add anything?
Yes. Is it okay if I just speak into without a photo or a video? Because the connection's way better without it. So I feel like I can't add too much, because what they said is everything that the current role that I'm in right now is also doing, but I wanted to emphasize two things that I didn't hear, so it might have been said, but I didn't hear it because of connection, is giving youth agency and knowing that they have agency and allowing them to make mistakes, even if you think that, in my role, even if I think it can be done something better, giving them the choice of saying, you can do it like this or you can do it like this. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I'm here to empower you. And the other thing that was brought up in the question was about a program happening for about 12 to 18 months, and then they're kind of in the same space that they're in. And I think one way that the Olive Tree Initiative is trying to solve that issue is having an extensive alumni network. So we've been around since 2007. We have over 700 alumni members who have achieved positions and that can help newer students. So if a student comes up to me and says, I'm interested in getting a job at the UN, or interested in peace building and human rights, and I want to go to a grad school for it, we can offer letters of recommendation. We can look into scholarships. We can look into people that are already working in those fields and seeing what possibilities are out there. And we want to help these students through our network.
Those are really great points. I think that longer term network that actually turns into tangible opportunities, and agency that isn't just like, okay, you can have your little youth sports activity, but it's like you actually have the ability to make change on something that you really care about. I think those are really important elements to youth empowerment too. Thank you, everyone. We've already started talking a little bit indirectly about some of the challenges to youth empowerment. And that's where I'd like to turn to next. Who would like to start on the challenges? All right, Saida.
Well, again, I'm going to talk from my experience and what we saw as the obstacles for the 5 years of running the organization. And I think some of my peers will tell some of the other things, but I'm going to focus on the partnership. We experienced a lot of partners from the field who usually you would require to run the programs, because we're an organization that basically do not work in one space. We bring our programs to different communities every year. It means that we need to find a reliable partner, local partner, but usually we don't work with governmental institutions. We try to avoid complexities of engaging with those kind of partners, but usually we will find someone similar to our organization, someone who shares the same vision, who've been doing similar activities on the spot. And unfortunately, it doesn't really work well all the time, because what I experienced as the leader of the organization is that sometimes you have this very competition attitude, even if the world of NGO, that makes no sense, but this is it. And it's not only because of some kind of a funding that needs to be shared between those organizations, but it's about positioning and branding and image. And the problem is that sometimes you get engaged with these partners. Initially, you talk through all of those things and they're clear and everyone's satisfied, but then on the later stages, they drop out, leaving you completely blinded in the environment that you never been working before. So I think that both of my colleagues, Cristina and Sean, experienced this together with me, and it is complicated. It doesn't really help to reach to the results or to move towards this collaborative SDG point that everyone is talking about, but we're not there yet. And I guess another point, and this is something more common, and it's for the rest of the NGOs and the youth-led organizations, it's more of an external obstacle, and it's about acquiring funding, and sometimes it becomes very political. I'll give you one example that happened this summer. We applied as we are a Lithuanian-based organization. We're eligible to apply for the funding from the European Commission, which is known as Erasmus+. I don't know how many people know about that, but it is a very big thing in Europe, and it helps lots of projects to come alive. So we applied for it third year in a row, applied for the program which called Summer School for Early Social Entrepreneurs. And it was funded the 2 years before, because 2 years before we brought it to Sweden and we brought it to Lithuania. And this year we said we're going to make it in Russia, you know. And obviously, well, not really obviously, but we received a rejection. So we didn't receive the money. And the reason was, it was said to us, a part of that Russia is not a place where we would like to bring our activities or fund anything because it's under sanctions. We also do not believe that there are possibilities for any kind of a social entrepreneurial spirit in the country, which is like, has nothing to do with the reality, because at the end of the day, I had to make a decision to run the school anyways without the funding. So we just decided to bring the speakers and trainers and made it a completely volunteer-based program. We found the local partners who gave us venue and provided all the necessities to run it. And I can tell you that it was probably one of the most incredible experience in terms of the outcomes that the projects that people brought at the end of the program were nothing to compare with what we've seen in Europe, and it just proves how short-blinded these grant-giving organizations and institutions are, and they limit so many communities and countries because of some kind of a political attitude towards this. I think that's something that's been a very heartbreaking for me to experience as the leader of the organization, as someone who would like to be very inclusive, you know, without any kind of the political attitudes and all those tensions.
Can I add to that? Yeah, sure.
So just to add to that, one of the biggest challenges is equity and access. So as Saida said, the events that we run actually get hundreds and hundreds, up to thousands of applications. But the problem is that many of the applicants are applying from countries in Africa, and we gladly welcome them and accept them. However, you all know what I'm about to say, they can't get visas. They're not eligible for funding. They're not able to come for those two reasons in particular, but any number of other reasons. So here we are offering this program. There's clearly a desire and a want for access to it, but because it's been held in locations where visas and costs are quite high and visas are challenging to get, they're not able to access it. And so Rachel and I had spoken about, you know, equity and access has been identified as an issue. Yet what is changing, right? Nothing. So what Saida, as the leader of the organization, and I just help out as I can, what we're trying to do is now move some of our events and some of the programs to Africa and to spaces where that's not our experience, but this is where it gets to the partners. We're trying to move it to the spaces where we're seeing people have an interest and want to access it, but for other reasons they're not able to. That obviously incurs costs for us and for our ability to do that as well. But I think for me, the biggest challenge is still that equity and access. We still have a lot of the funding focused around youth is still in many ways kind of US and European. Of course, we have lots of stories of places in which it's not, but how many of those stories, right? And let's look at that proportionate to the population of youth in the places where people are getting chosen. And so I think creating more and more opportunity, more and more space for all youth to be involved and to be engaged, that's certainly what we're trying to do, and what we know many organizations, and I'm sure all of you here are doing that as well, right? But that's really what I think is a big challenge, but the next step.
I'm going to move to Sean.
Oh, okay.
So Sean, do you want to add something?
Yes, I just wanted to add that, speaking as someone who works at a university, I feel that the biggest challenge to youth empowerment right now, specifically within the field of conflict resolution and with regards to areas like Israel, Palestine, and Turkey and Armenia, is there's this sense of hopelessness and indifference in the American college university system towards these regions of conflict. And what they see is the status quo remaining and nothing being done. And so add the Trump administration to the mix, and you have even higher sense of despair among what can be done, not just in these countries, but also what's going on in our country right now. And then we have the conversation of conflict resolution with regards to race relations and these kinds of things, which we've also been trying to establish on campus. And the unfortunate thing is that the powers that be have made it harder for students to care. So what I mean by that is, for example, we used to take trips every year to the South Caucasus region with Turkey, Armenia, and Georgia. But right now, there are no diplomatic relations between the United States and Turkey. So the UC system will not allow students to go there. So you have students who care about this issue, but they don't have the means to actually go to a certain region that they can learn more about. And instead, it just becomes this stagnant, cold, polarized, weird kind of thing. Whereas 10 years ago, it was this polarized, hot thing that people were very passionate about and they wanted to do something about it. And now it's kind of almost at this weird, uneasy, if I can use any kind of analogy of this like calm water, but it's kind of brewing underneath. And so what we're trying to do is, to me, this is more, I can't speak on behalf of the Olive Tree Initiative or on behalf of anything, but it's, how can we get students to care about these issues again and do it constructively?
Yeah, I think those are really important points so far. We've talked about how politics kind of determine the way that we can do our programming, how competition for funding and recognition is a challenge, how funding, which I don't think we've even started to unpack, there's so much more to the funding challenges, and the visa issue, equity and access. Sata, would you like to add something before we turn to the audience for questions and comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a few things because a lot has been said from political decisions affecting, young people, which is a huge challenge, to low access to opportunities and services. And another issue is about safe space, freedom from restrictions on, expressions and all that, especially young people that are advocates, young people that are preaching peace and all of these things. Sometimes it becomes so hard for a young person, especially you are not financially empowered, you don't have the legal backing and all that. And then when you get involved in a case where you try to seek access to justice or to promote gender equality and all of these issues, it's kind of hard and it becomes a challenge for a young person. I feel it's something major that we need to look at. And with the issue about another challenge I feel is difficulty in accessing funding. One of the speakers mentioned it, but another thing is that applying for funding, especially for youth institutions, sometimes the criteria is so high, and some of, almost all these funding or donors expect the institutions applying to either be legally registered or someone who have maybe worked and managed money and all that before. But some of these youth institutions are still struggling. Some of these youth institutions are locally working from the grassroots level. They are advocating for the rights of people, but because they almost like going against, and because when you're trying to register locally, I run a non-governmental organization in Liberia, and I remember how hard it was before we got register and got a thorough clearance, because we were talking about human rights issues, from protesting on the street to demanding access to safe space, demanding access to justice. I remember we got involved in a representative case where he allegedly sexually abused a 13-year-old, and it was so hard. And at the end of the day, to get legally registered because of the people running the institution. Either these young people are the one holding government accountable and all that. So at the end of the day, to get international funding from donors, if you are not registered, it becomes a problem. And another challenge is not being included in national decision-making processes, be it at the national or international level. And I'd like to share one experience before I climax on this question is, I remember that when I was like the chairperson for the Children's Forum as a child, then there was this whole big event in Liberia. It was not just an event, it was a process. It was the constitutional review process for Liberia. And since 1989, Liberia have never like gone to a constitutional review process, and they were reviewing the constitution for the next batch of years. So it means it was going to like affect, children and young people and all that. And can you imagine that the review process was being held and no child was represented? As chair of the Children's Parliament, then in my county, someone told me about it. And I just went there out of boldness and stuff like that. And I was asked by, the receptionist, were you invited? I'm like, no, but I'm the chair for the Children's Forum. So I need to be here as the mouthpiece for the children. No, we can't do that. And because there were journalists, like I said about empowerment and recognition again, because there were journalists at the event who knew me, they're like, no, this little girl is like the chairperson for the Children's Parliament. She's this. And they allowed me into the event. And from that point, what I did was to let them know that you can have a constitutional review process. I mean, it's about the country, and young people needed to be involved and included at all levels. And then you don't have children represented in the event. And then the commission promised at that event that across the 15 counties, whatever event they attended, they would have made sure that at least 10 children, basically just 10 children are represented in every consultation at the national level, which was like a plus. So inclusion in national decision-making processes at the local and national level is a huge challenge, and young people have to fight their way through to get recognized, to participate in these events. I feel it's a huge challenge for us as young people.
I think those are really important points you made, and they reflect a lot of the things that we actually heard from youth-led peace organizations around the world. That's access to justice, safety, so many groups. I say organizations because many of them have difficulty registering, just like Sata was saying. They face lots of government restrictions because it gets to what Cristina was pointing to, that threat of power. We're happy to pay for your sports competitions or like support your arts projects, just don't get near our power and controversial topics, or like try to pursue justice if it's gonna put me in an uncomfortable position. It's also interesting, she talked about the difficulty applying for funding and all of the restrictions and requirements that you have to get through. We found that over 50% of youth-led organizations or groups working on peace-related issues operate on less than $5,000 a year, which if you look at international organizations or like NGO budgets around the world, that is crazy, less than $5,000 a year. And 97% of their membership are volunteers. And so you see young people often having to do these kinds of volunteer efforts, which are really admirable, and they find ways to get over this funding restriction. But just imagine the greater impact we could get to if they were better funded. I want to pause now for a few reflections or comments from the audience before we talk more about how do we get to greater impact.
My name is Jacob Alwong. I'm from South Sudan. I'm a founder of Nonviolent Youth Initiative. It's a very small NGO, and I'm touched by all the challenges you have just said. So those are the challenges we face also in South Sudan. So I have a question, but I just want to go a bit to arrive at the question. So my country is a brand new country. We have been through many wars, nearly 50 years in war. We split the country thinking our problems will stop, but we created another war among ourselves, and the war is dragging on. And the most affected populations are youth. Youth are just the, like a necessary bait where the opposition and government recruits to go and fight their own war, leave alone paying attention to empower them. Empowerment is something very far away in their mind other than recruiting them to fight their own war. So as I and some other colleagues in South Sudan are trying to push our parliament with the theme we call define us, define the youth, not me necessarily, but define the youth. The age that define youth is not that it's not clear in our constitution who is youth actually before we deal with youth. So we thought if we are defined constitutionally, we will have a big picture to even develop programs for youth. But the parliament, I talked to my representative, but it's not even listening to me, like go and push for this agenda to define the youth first before we even jump in to empower them. We don't know who are the youth. Could be from age 1 to age 30, 40, 50. And we adopted that from former country we call Sudan. People at age 60, they still call themselves youth. And it is very difficult to even get that. Not only that, the partners also in the country are paying less attention, but they are trying their best to calm themselves, to manage the money. They are afraid, like you said, they don't want to give money directly to youth leaders, still think they are young, but they are matured. They are fighting wars, they are carrying guns, they are doing terrible things. Why can't they be trusted to run peace-building work? So my first question is, what advice can you give me that I will carry back to my team in South Sudan to better advise our government to adopt the youth definition of the youth policy? We need to be defined, and the youth policy need to be made very clear in our constitution. So if you can give me that advice, that will be very important. And second question is, how can we make the accessibility of funding very easy for youth to access, either with the partners or with the organizations? Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. And I think we're going to save your second question to our next discussion, because our next discussion is about how do we get to greater impact. And one of the key questions is how do we get to funding that actually fits better for youth work? So first, do we want to see if someone wants to answer about defining youth?
How to approach the government.
Oh, okay, how to approach the government.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Thank you so much for, first of all, the work that you're doing and for being here and for sharing your story with us. I really appreciate that. We pictured this as a round table, like we'd all be on the floor together to really value everyone's contribution, but here we are on a stage. So I just want to say thank you for just being part of this with us. Regarding how to address government, so I can only speak to you from a U.S. perspective, so please take it with a grain of salt, but let me just give you some suggestions for making a case. Some crucial things is that when you can tell government officials how it will benefit them, how they'll get reelected, how they'll keep their donors, which I don't know how elections, I mean, I'm aware of them in South Sudan, but you know, in the U.S., money is how you get elected, right? If you can tell them how whatever policy you're suggesting is going to benefit them, and I hate to put it this way, but you know, keep them in their position or keep them popular, that's one way to approach it. I think one thing to keep in mind is that if the policy is to bring about justice for youth or to do more youth inclusion, the selling point is less important, right? If you want to get people to listen to you, if you come at them with my typical bent, which is like, you're abusing power and you're blah, 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 right there, you're out the door. I think when you can tell people, again, and from an inclusive sort of approach, when you can say to somebody, I know you care about this, but there are constraints on what you can do. Let me tell you some reasons why this is going to be beneficial for you, why this is going to help you in your election, in your, in your council, whatever it might be. I think if you can put it to that kind of framework, someone is more likely to listen to you. My other comment is just going to be, bring a coalition, right? Get all the organizations you can to come with you to sign a joint letter. Bring multiple representatives from cross-sector as that's applicable, right? I recognize that may not always be beneficial, right? But bring the constituencies that they care about and show that there's a collective desire for this to happen. Those are just my suggestions.
All right, one more comment or reflection, and then we'll go to the next topic.
I just wanted to add a few things. If you want to engage government, one thing you need to take into consideration from my experience on how we got the children's law passed is to continue to engage government officials, like be consistent about your action, continue to reach out, organize like stakeholders meeting, and continue to ask questions and make them know the importance of the issue, even if it's against them or whatever it is. You got to make them understand that it's important for the young people. And what advice, your last question was about what advice do we have to in terms of to define the youth policy in terms of the age range. I feel like there are a lot of documents you can relate to, like in my country when we were trying to do the youth policy, we kind of first allow cross-section of young people to give their views on the issues. We review international documents. We look at the United Nations regulations or policies that Liberia is signatory to. We went at the African Union level, review documents that we can use as the kid when it comes to developing policy and for manifest. What we did, because Liberia was supposed to go into election, we made sure and every politician that was
You're cutting in and out a little bit, Sata. Sorry to interrupt, but it's actually quite hard to hear you. If I got it correctly, though, you're saying your main point was about consistent follow-up. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was about engagement. Is it still bad? Is my network okay now?
Yeah, it seems to be better now. I'm just going to take one more question from the audience, and then we'll talk more about funding and more about how we get to greater impact.
Okay.
Thank you. Maria Stage, UNDP, working on youth empowerment. Thank you so much for sharing your very strong youth-led initiatives. It's wonderful to hear, and luckily there are so many around the world. As we have already heard from the findings from the Missing Peace and other reports, there are indeed good reason to support and invest more and really create a more enabling and conducive environment if we are to somehow support sustainable peace and development, also for the SDGs. So I'll come to a question, but just a few reflections coming out of also just the youth policy that we just had a quick discussion on, just to highlight a few reflections coming from some conversations around this. I also think it's very important when we are talking about the youth policies that accountability for the implementation is thought into the process even when a youth policy is being renewed or developed, because else it can be standalone and there can be really great youth participation, very meaningful participation in the design. But if there is no accountability for the implementation, and also if there is no strong collaboration between maybe a youth ministry and the other ministries, then there can be some limitations to where the youth policy can go. So just some reflections on that. Also, one of you mentioned in the beginning the role of young people in prevention of violent extremism, PVE. And I just wanted to say that we, earlier this year in UNDP, issued a report called Frontlines, which is exactly showing through case studies and desk studies and interviews and consultations that young people really have a strong and very important role in the prevention of violent extremism, and there is indeed need for more support and investment in the positive role of youth here. We also have an initiative called the 16 by 16 initiative, which came earlier this year when we saw a gap in the participation of young people in the review of Sustainable Development Goals 16 on peaceful, just and inclusive societies, where we were able to bring 16 young men and women who are really already forwarding engagement and making progress on SDG 16 in their own local context around the world and bring them into the conversations in the UN and in the preparatory conferences to these reviews. Also going from there to some of your comments that these conferences should not be a standalone and you should not just bring people in. We're also looking to really see how to engage further and get their advice on more policy and programming and to connect them with other people and young people as well as our colleagues around the world. Now coming to the question. In the session yesterday morning here, also on local peace building in relation to international peace building, some of the participants were highlighting the importance of coalitions at the national level. And I was just really curious to hear whether you have experience in your own countries and context having coalitions or networks together with other young people and what this has meant for your work. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing. And that is a perfect segue into our conversation about how do we get to greater individual and collective impact. I know that coalition building and networking across borders is part of what some of these panelists see as an important way to get to greater impact. I'm going to invite, let's start with Sean. Do you want to go ahead and respond around coalition building, or do you want to talk more generally about how we get to greater impact, how we better support youth-led initiatives? I'm sure we will get to your question eventually, though.
I would speak, I have more experience with impact and getting more, I guess the real question is like, how do we get more funding? Is that correct? Like, or is that going to be separate?
Yes. How do we better support youth-led initiatives and support them to better impact?
So this is where I think many people who are involved in peace building and these kinds of NGO works and initiatives are very much centered on, have studied the humanities. This is where I think the business admin side is very helpful, because I think that marketing and telling stories is very powerful and very important and impactful. And I think that if we're able to show success stories to people that we think can help us either financially or networking or going the next step, and that is, we can do it through social media, we can do it through brochures, we can do it through reports, financial reports, as well as studies and a plethora of other options that we can do, and putting that out there. And I think that has been underutilized in the nonprofit sector across. And I think that's something that we can start focusing on, is showing where someone's money is going and what that money does. And so what we try to do is saying is this, like, your money is going towards the development of students in their leadership roles. And that has resonated with our donors as well as our community in general. And I think that if you tell a powerful story, then it will resonate with people. The only thing is do we have the resources to tell those stories? Because as we all know, Facebook has algorithms, Instagram has algorithms, all these things, and then you have to pay to play now. So again, more challenges to solutions that we're trying to offer. But again, I think the best thing to start is how are we packaged? How is our initiative, whatever initiative it is, how is that packaged and how can we sell it? And it is a marketing mindset, but I think it's also useful to utilize.
Thank you for sharing. And I would point out that measuring and evaluating impact is one area where young people around the world demonstrated an interest and technical support to improve their capacities in this. I'm going to invite now one of the ladies on the stage to speak.
This is addressing the question about impact, right? Yeah, so I think the best way to bring the impact is for youth to get involved, and then as they learn skills and make connections, to then spread the love and use that space to use your knowledge and your connections to open up space for more youth. I really have to just give a call out to my friend Saida here. She has held this organization together through multiple just changes, political situation. I hope it's okay to tell them, but Saida is actually a citizen of Belarus who lives in Russia for a reason you can most likely imagine, which is that she's very active in promoting youth. And she has held this organization together because she really believes in the importance of giving youth a platform to build some skills and then take them out. And so what I would say is, after participating in Youth to Youth and now working with Saida on it, what I've done is I actually applied to Youth with this idea for this thing called Dialogue Through Art, and it was going to be all about collaborative art as a way to do cross-cultural communication. I don't actually specialize in that at all, okay? And so as I was moving along and we were talking about stuff, what became clear to me is that I wanted to actually take that interest and join an organization that does that. So I now am on the board and work with something called the Pomegranate Center, which teaches collaborative communication and collaborative art. What I'm doing, though, is trying to bring a youth focus to that particular organization. They generally specialize in leading adults, as it were, in collaborative communication for problem solving, and I'm trying to help them bring a youth focus, so something that is to people who are under the age of 35. The other thing is that I did a leadership fellowship with the Jackson Foundation, and what I would like to do, what I'm trying to help them do as well, is create a similar fellowship, but for high school students. So the fellowship I did was for youth, people under 40, but basically, kind of like 22 and up youth. What I'm trying to do is help them take the fellowship that they created and that I was a part of, and now let's replicate it, but for high schoolers. Let's give them the same opportunities. And so I think the way that we get greater impact is we take what we've learned, we take the things we get from participating and having, stuff behind our names, fellowship this and appointment that, and now we're going to open up space and use that to bring more youth into the fold. And so that would be my statement on impact.
Thank you. I'm going to turn quickly to Sata. Do you want to add anything about how we get to better supporting youth-led initiatives, whether through funding or?
Yeah. I believe the best way we can support youth-led initiatives to achieve greater impact for peace is to ask what will help young people to reach, greater impact. Ask young people, what is it you want? Ask us, what is it you want at this point? And also include youth in national decision-making processes instead of just always, the only time you tend to include young people is like celebrating special events like the Youth Day, Children's Day, or International Day of the Gay Child. Engage young people, collaborate with young people in youth institutions, and see young people as partners, not just beneficiaries all the time. And I think we should always remember that you cannot do anything for young people without young people themselves. So I feel the best way is to ask young people, engage them, collaborate, and see them as partner in the process when it comes to peace, when it comes to, increase in promoting human rights and countering violence and extremism. We've got to see young people as partners. Yes.
Thank you. That's a really important point, is not to assume we know what is best for youth. Go ahead, Saida, please add.
I will just add to what's been said, because I completely agree with all of my colleagues on this point. I wanted to come back to the point that you raised about the making coalitions and networks. So that is something I truly believe in. And what I've been doing for the past couple of years is trying to unite what we raise as the Y2Y network of all the people who is right now alumni of our programs, or those people who somehow engaged as a staff members or went through the internship. So what I've been doing is trying to connect to the networks of other organizations like Impact Hub, One Young World. And I believe this is the way to, first of all, raise a credibility and trust of those locally based NGOs, like the one you have in Sudan. So I believe that this is the way and this is the path for us to receive that funding as well, and to become a bit more credible in the eyes of those funding giving organizations and institutions. Because when we're going to have like when we're going to become a power, you know, and it's not anymore about borders, who is taking which piece of pie, you know, it's about making impact. At the end of the day, that's the most important part. So it doesn't matter how it's going to be called, you know. So I truly believe that every person who participates in the programs that we design together with them, it has the same right to access any other resources of other organizations. So I really believe in this, and this is what I work on, and I talk to the leaders of other NGOs. So to drop this fear, you know, they do not risk anything. At the end of the day, they actually empowering themselves as organizations, and they might have a bigger outcomes of this kind of, you know, going through this fear, trying to say that, okay, you know, someone would take ownership of my programs or the activities that I designed. This is not the case, and I believe that we need to move towards this collaborative approach when we talk about youth development and the programs that are supposed to boost the young people.
Yeah, I think those are really important points, and I would just maybe also respond on the funding question. Building off of that, I think the system often incentivizes, when I say the system, I mean the way that our funding cycles are structured, often incentivize that competition that makes it difficult to build coalitions among young people. And then also the funding doesn't really fit the purpose of youth work often. There's an assumption that more structured and kind of like hierarchically managed action is better action, but that's not actually the case. We actually see that sometimes you might just need a group together for a very short time, and then they might need to disperse, but they can accomplish a lot and have a great impact in that short time. And so when young people were asked in several studies now what kind of funding actually works best for them, it's flexible funding that allows for risk-taking and supports innovation. And that also isn't just attached to action, but it's also about building core capacities. So that's a little bit about what we've learned in terms of funding. I would also add the point for coalition building, because Search for Common Ground is with other UN actors in an interagency working group, which is now the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security. And one of the biggest takeaways we've had is the willingness of organizations to overcome their need to assert their brand all the time, and to actually get to what is the bigger mission or interest that we're going for, which is hard because, again, we're competing for funding. I would like to ask the audience if there are any other reflections or questions. Yep.
Hi, my name is Dino Grifo. I'm from Montreal, Canada, and I have different hats. And one of them is we've started a foundation named the Peace Grantmakers Network. And what we've put together is a whole group of philanthropic foundations, companies, and a group to raise money, to have funds available to do some impact investment. But based on what I'm hearing and the realities that we have, so we have people that come and see us or groups that come and see us to get funds, right? Or get grant making, is I think the concept we've talked just a bit earlier is networking. So different groups, we've got youth working on different projects, we've got NGOs, and just in Montreal or Quebec, we have sometimes maybe 10 to 12 to 15 NGOs working on the same thing. So as a donor, we said, okay, say we have $50,000 to invest in that in kind of endeavor, we need to split or just choose 5 or just to choose 2. So seeing that problem at first, what we've done afterwards is saying, okay, we're not going to give you money just yet. Form a group, network, at least 10 organizations that focus on the same project, okay? And then once that is done, we will give you maybe once a week or 2 days a week a person paid by us that will help you work together, right? Promote what you have to do and see what tools each of you have that may complement each other. And then once that's done and you get through that first year and we actually go and do a real investment and maybe for that group give $50,000. And then it works. So we've got like Tools of Peace, which is one of our good investments which worked very well. But when we come back to our investors, and that's how we see them, we have to give them back and say, here's the impact, here's what it's done, and here's what it brings you back as a company also, because we've got banks and things like that, but not for their logo only, but for the company's employees at the same time. So how is the company seen inside? So employees that see that the company invests and sees that as something important for them, makes them, it's a mindfulness thing. We want to make sure that people are sitting down and seeing that where they're working, they have this vision also. And it's empowerment to the youth, but also to the employees and the company indirectly. So I think it's important. So networking is the key. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. That sounds very similar to the collective impact approach, which is similar idea, recognition that so many organizations are working on the same topic. How do we bring them together and have them work in the same direction rather than, like all over the place, which is something that we're piloting now in Jos, Nigeria and Colombo, Sri Lanka. Yeah, really interesting approach. And it's reached some incredible results in things like homelessness and high school dropout and things like that. Any reflections from the audience or the panelists?
I have something to say, but I would rather wait for the audience.
We've got one question or comment here, and then I would love to hear from you.
My question is, so I work at an international NGO, and what I would love to hear about from you all, because you're involved in youth-led initiatives or organizations, is one, what has an effective partnership with a donor or an INGO looked like? Like what is maybe one or more things that you look for when you partner with another organization? And then the second is, what have you learned from the way that you work as a youth-led organization or initiative that you think is actually valuable for INGOs to adopt and to follow moving forward to become more impactful in what we do?
Yes. So Sean, did you want to respond to any of those questions in your comment?
No, my comment was not related, and I don't feel qualified to answer such a question. It was a good question. So. Totally
fine. Well, go ahead and share your comment, and then we'll see if some of the other panelists will respond to that question and any final notes.
Well, I just wanted to say that we talked a lot about challenges in this work that we're doing, and it seems very difficult, especially in the time that we're living in right now. And I just wanted to say that, like, little spark of light, that I wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing today unless I got involved with something like this at a younger age, and I wouldn't have got involved with that unless someone else said, some changes needs to be done. I think everyone on the panel and everyone in the room thinks the same way, that the status quo isn't good. And not to look at these challenges and be dismayed, but to think these are challenges that we can overcome and get excited about it. And I am excited about it. And I'm very grateful to be a part of the panel and what everyone is doing. So I just wanted to leave with that note.
Thank you, Sean, for sharing those positive last thoughts. Since we started 5 minutes late, I know it says we're out of time, but I think we've got maybe 5 more minutes just to wrap up. I know, Cristina, you wanted to share a final thought.
Yeah, and just to answer your question on the what have I learned, so from being part of Youth to Youth and then participating in the Jackson Foundation Leadership Fellowship, and then what I'm doing now, the number one thing I've learned is that when you tell people that you believe in them, that you trust them, that you know they have the capacity to succeed, and when you say that over and over, particularly to young people, they will believe it, and they will feel empowered, and they will you know, come forth with whatever the things that I'm trying to say, like they will produce, but I'm trying to avoid like a, you know, capitalist word here. They will reach those goals that they set for themselves. I've found that the more people have said to me, hey, you're welcome, you have something to contribute, like my friend Saida does for me quite often. When I found that people at the foundation were saying, you're awesome, come and do this thing, the more people say that to you, the more you're like, yeah, okay, I got this. So what I've learned and what I would ask everyone to do, whether you're youth or you run an organization or you just have access to youth, when you tell people, you rock, you can do this, I believe in you, I trust you, they'll do it. And I think if that's a message to really take forth, it's that we should be saying that to each other, and we should be saying that to the next group that we're bringing up.
Yeah, I will quickly address the question regarding the meaningful partnership. What I believe works really well for organizations is where they do not seek the program for the sake of the program, you know, or project, because if it sounds good, it's gonna bring some kind of benefits over the social networks or promotional issues. So I do believe that, first of all, the cool partnership, good partnership, it's something that benefits for the employees of this organization if they're involved, because often I see that partnership exists between one leader of one NGO and another leader of NGO, and lots of times the employees or those people who volunteer for the organization have nothing to do with this partnership. You know, they sometimes have till the last moment, they don't know what's going on. So I do believe that it should be a beneficial process for everyone in both of the organizations. They have to involve, because it's about learning and it's about raising the capacity of those organizations to manage bigger projects, international projects, because sometimes it's super important to build this organizational resilience. And I think also it's a long-lasting effect, whether you are able to come back to this partner a year after, 2 years after, to run something else. You know, that is an indicator for me that it's a good partnership. And if the second engagement or the third engagement is easier for everyone, it means that we learn our lessons, that we became better as an organization, that we learned something through the process. So yeah, that's something that I believe.
Sata, did you want to share a final thought?
Yeah, as a young person who have worked with non-governmental organization, especially funding an institution that work with human rights and, you know, fighting and countering violence and extremism in Liberia, I know how it feels from running a project. Currently we have this project called We Say Change project, and we are running that project with like 5,000 for the entire year, and we are like the first institution, and then we run the only online safe space for sexual gender-based violence survivors, where they can get psychosocial help and counseling. And also we have like the national directory where we put people in touch with the police and all of those things. As a young institution. So I know how it feels as a young person to run an NGO, to not have money, but yet still you are doing something big and something different. And at the end of the day, what matters is collaboration. What I have learned over the years is to continue to be resilient, is to continue to be consistent, and to continue to reach out to people. So I just hope that we can see this as a wake-up call to continue to support more youth institutions, because it's hard as a young person to run an organization, especially you want to contribute and ensure that people's rights don't get violated, and to also help to stop violence and extremism from
That's a
countries
great
like
point to end on. Yes, and we are unfortunately
Can I
out
make
of
one statement, Rachel?
It'll
take 30
sure.
seconds. It's just that I just wanted people to know that the summit we're doing this year is on peace building, and it's going to be taking in Kiev, Ukraine, in May-ish of 2020. So we just wanted to let people know, because we welcome you and we include you.
Thank you to the panelists. Thank you for everyone who participated
you.
today. We would love to have follow-up conversations in the room for whoever wants to stick around. I've got some ideas for how adult-led organizations can better support youth and youth leadership within our own organizations. I'd love to talk more about that. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.